Hey guys, today you're going to be taking some notes on the peripheral nervous system. Um, this is definitely not my preferred method of going about giving you guys notes, but really didn't have anything else for you guys to do, so we're going to move on. What you guys are going to want to do is the notes are going to come up as if I was here, but you'll just want to get Miss Brubeck to pause them for you towards the end of the slide if anybody needs more time, or just whoever usually ends up being the last one writing. Just have her say when you're done so that you get all the information. I don't know who that would be. It's usually Kayla. Hi, Kayla. Um, but if you need her to wait, then just tell her to wait. All right, so anyways, we're going to take notes on the peripheral nervous system. We have talked strictly about the central nervous system in the brain and the spinal cord some. Today we're going to talk about obviously the peripheral, which has more to do with the nerves. The peripheral nervous system is just the nerve that branch out from the spinal cord and connects to the rest of the parts of the body, and that's why they're called the peripheral, because they're on the outside. There are going to be two divisions that communicate with the central nervous system. You've got the autonomic nervous system, which is communication from your heart, your visceral organs like your kidney, liver, etc., and your glands that talk to the brain. There are two subdivisions of that, which we're not going to go in depth into a lot here, and that's the sympathetic division and the parasympathetic. And your sympathetic is basically your fight or flight response. So when something startles you, do you get in defense mode to fight, or do you run? And all of us are slightly different in that regard. You probably are more aware of the type of person that you are. Do you tend to get aggressive, or do you tend to have that innate tendency to kind of run? The parasympathetic is just basically, they call it the rest and digest. So it's what your body does while you're at rest and sleeping, and then digestion, stuff that you don't really have any conscious control over. And what we're going to talk mostly about today is the somatic nervous system, because these are the conscious activities in the skeletal system and the skeletal muscles and the skin. So we're going to spend most time talking about that, and the rest of your notes will really just be about the somatic nervous system. We're not going to talk much about the autonomic nervous system. And within the somatic nervous system, you're going to have the cranial nerves, which we'll talk about first, and the spinal nerves, which we'll talk about at the end. I should say, if you need more time, obviously just tell her to wait here. The spinal nerves come out of the spine, so obviously they're not the spinal cord itself, because that is the central nervous system. The cranial nerves come out of the brain directly as well. You guys saw some of the cranial nerves when you guys were doing the dissection the other day, the little nubs that were on the outside. Those are the beginnings or the attachments where the nerves would connect to the brain. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves, and we number them with Roman numerals, hence the fake Roman guy over here on the right side of your board. Here's just a diagram of the 12 cranial nerves. When you guys looked at the underside of the brain, you probably saw maybe some of the ones in this region, not so much probably the ones in this region. It just kind of looked fleshy and meaty, and you probably didn't pay much attention to it. But you may have noticed some of these, like the olfactory bulb was one thing that I had you guys look at. But not always will you be able to see all of them. The first one is the olfactory nerve, and they are numbered in order because this is the number that they have. So like if you're looking for a cranial nerve number 1, it will always be the olfactory nerve. And it is responsible for your sense of smell. Outside of your central nervous system, it's called the olfactory nerves, but inside the central nervous system, they call it tracts. Just little subtle differences there. You probably don't need to write down the outside portion of that. I just want to let you guys know the biggest thing you need to know is it's the sense of smell. And those were one of the things that I had you guys look for in the dissection that we did the other day. As you can see, they were right here in this area. All right. Cranial nerve number 2 is the optic nerve. Obviously, that transmits information to the retina of the eye, which is responsible for vision. The optic nerve actually crosses at the optic chiasma, or chiasma, however you would pronounce that, crosses from each side. We'll talk about that a little bit more in our senses unit, which will be our next unit. All right, number 3 is the oculomotor nerve. This controls the muscles of the eye, and that obviously is going to control the movement. If you just kind of break up the word, motor kind of implies that movement. Oculo is eye, so it should be easy to remember. And there's where you would locate it. It's connected to the muscles, obviously, the eye. There's also called the trochlear nerve, and the trochlear nerve is responsible for the extrinsic eye muscles. So this is going to be for, obviously, your eyelids. And as you can see, it runs to the pons there. The trigeminal is the next one, and that is your main sensory nerve of the face, and has a large branch that goes through the foramen of the skull, that foramen magnum that we learned earlier in the year. There are 3 parts of the trigeminal nerve. That's why it's called the trigeminal nerve, but I'm not going to ask you guys to know those. Number 6 is the abducens. The abducens controls only one of the eye muscles. The rest are controlled by those other nerves, but this one controls the lateral rectus. So that's going to move your eye from the left and the right. All right, next is the facial nerve, conveniently named. It sends nerves obviously to the muscles of your face and facial expression. So a person who can't blink or smile may have damage to this particular nerve. What's up, Mr. Filer?
I walk by, I see you, and then I think of cheese.
Sorry about that. Mr. Filer walked in. Can't really remember where I was at, but we were talking about the facial nerve. Bell's palsy is when you have damage to this nerve. You guys don't necessarily have to write that down. You guys won't have to be to know that for the quiz, but this is the nerve that gets damaged when somebody has like facial nerve damage and they can't use a particular side of their face. All right, next is the auditory, which you will hear called the vestibulocochlear as well. Strictly hearing and balance for this particular one. We'll talk more about the ear and the eye and all that stuff when we get in our senses unit. All right, number 9 is the glossopharyngeal, which is your pharynx and your tongue, so your throat and your tongue area. This is responsible for swallowing, speech, and the release of saliva. Number 10 is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is named after vagrants, which are wanderers. This is the only cranial nerve that travels into the abdomen, like the rest of them do not go near that area, so they don't really have anything to do with the abdominal region. This is the most important cranial nerve because it controls all of your thoracic/abdominal cavities, which obviously we know the visceral organs are the ones that keep you alive. They're under automatic control, basically, so we can't mess them up. Next is the accessory nerve, which enters the skull through the foramen magnum, that large foramen, large hole, and supplies the shoulders or the muscles of the shoulder. You guys may have pinched this one before. I know I have. It doesn't feel very good. I've actually even pinched it in this region as well. And I was turning my neck really fast in football in 8th grade and couldn't move my head for like 2 days. And last but not least is the hypoglossal nerve, and it supplies the tongue only. This one's more responsible for uh, the speech, so moving the tongue in its ability to talk, not necessarily, swallowing or anything like that, we as you saw with the glossopharyngeal nerve. All right, that is all of the cranial nerves. You will need to know all of the cranial nerves, and you'll need to know them in order. So this is an old, mnemonic that people have used in the past. On old Olympus towering top, a Finn in German viewed a hop. Just one way that you can try to remember the nerves in order. This is just a picture of all of them again. As you can see, they move all through the bottom portion of your brain. Okay, so real quick, your spinal nerves. There are 8 pairs of cervical nerves. Now, you guys probably remember there are 7 cervical vertebrae, so it doesn't necessarily coordinate with numbers here. There are 8 cervical nerves, 12 thoracic, which there were 12 thoracic vertebrae, so that worked out well, and there are 5 lumbar, so that worked out well as well, but don't always coordinate with the number of vertebrae. And then the sacrum and the coccyx also have their nerves, so there are 31 total spinal nerves. Okay, so your spinal cord ends actually right at the part of your vertebrae where you start getting to the lumbar area. So between the first and second lumbar vertebrae, your spinal cord ends. So what happens is you have these nerves that branch off towards the end of this thing, and they kind of spread out to the side. And this is called the cauda equina, which is Latin for horse's tail. So you can see here that they kind of stop, and the spinal cord does, and then these nerves branch off, and like I said, they just kind of call it cauda equina because it looks like a horse's tail. All right. Next concept is the branching off of these nerves from the vertebrae. They branch off from the spinal cord at areas called roots, and whether it moves towards the front or the back, you have 2 types. You have dorsal root ganglion and ventral root ganglion. Your dorsal is going to move towards the back of the body, and the ventral is going to move towards the front of the body. All right. Next concept is called plexuses, and these are main portions of the spinal nerves that make up these really large networks. So it's just a bunch of nerves in one area, and we have 3 regions that form major plexuses, and those will be on the next slide here. You have the cervical plexus, which innervates the neck, the brachial or brachial plexus, which innervates the shoulders, the arms, and the hands, and the lumbrosacral plexus, which is your pelvic area and your sciatic nerve. That's actually it. Hopefully you guys got through all these today. If you didn't, that's okay. We will finish them when you guys get back in here on Tuesday. No homework. Don't worry about any of that. You guys just enjoy prom, have fun, and be safe.